us this evening, starting with Walnut Valley School Board Clerk Layla Abu Taleb. School Board Member Dr. Tony Torng. Superintendent Dr. Bob Taylor. Chief Operating Officer Dr. Matt Whitmer. Assistant Superintendent of Educational Services Dr. Jeanette Coe. And Director of Student Services and Secondary Education Dr. Ryan Main. From Diamond Bar High School, we have Principal David Hong, Instructional Dean Gabriel Aguilar, and grade level coordinators Dave Desmond and Yvette Tumbiero. From Walnut High School, we have Principal Dr. Michelle Liu, and grade level coordinators Jennifer Tucker and Ernesto Ruiz. A special shout out and thank you to the College and Career Pathways Advisors from both schools, Bree Ayala and Christine Nordarcy Hernandez, for all of their hard work in organizing tonight's event. Collectively, Walnut Valley Unified School District aims to show all people they are welcome here. We desire for you to also feel welcome in whatever path you choose post-high school. We hope you enjoy the evening, find value in what is presented, and feel welcome exploring options available to you after high school. Let's get started. I'd like to welcome to the stage our superintendent, Dr. Bob Taylor.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for being here today. This is one of my favorite presentations that we do now for quite a few years for our high school students, and just as important for all of our parents. Our speaker tonight is Paul Kanarek, and I had a chance to start working with Paul about 24 years ago. I was a brand new principal at a middle school, and I had heard about Paul Kanarek and the work he had done to start up the Princeton Review on the West Coast, and had a chance to meet him. Next thing you know, he was working closely with our staff and our students and helped us to recognize some great growth academically for our students. And I knew that he was the type of person we'd want to partner with forever. And so Paul and I have been close friends for a long time. Everywhere I've gone, I've asked Paul, would you mind to come along and help us out? And so now he's been with Walnut Valley for probably 10 to 12 years now, working alongside us. What you get out of this tonight, I think, is a lot. Two things that stand out to me. One is Paul will help us have a better understanding of how to get to college, if that's the decision we want as students and we want for our children. But secondly, and probably more importantly, and I haven't talked to Paul about exactly what he's going to talk about, but there's always an emphasis on the importance of finding the right fit when you go to college. More important than anything else is we want our kids to be happy, which will lead to success for them. And so I'm really excited about that. Personal story, we have 3 children. Our oldest is 27, our middle child, our daughter, is 24, and our youngest just graduated from high school last year. I was sitting in here last year in the same presentation, and Paul started talking about the Western University Exchange Program. And next thing you know, fast forward about 4 weeks ago, we dropped our youngest son off at Boise State University, where he's having a great time. Sometimes I think he's having too good of a time, but he's having a great time there. And it was all started because of some of the information that Paul shared that night. It triggered a few things in us, which ignited an interest in that school for our son, and that's where he's at now. So you never know how these things will develop for your own children, where they'll end up, but the information you get tonight will certainly help you kind of navigate that path. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce a good friend of mine and a good friend of Walnut Valley, Mr. Paul Kanarek.
I will try to prove myself worthy. as I was making what is now a very long drive for me, I live up in Central California, I was like, why am I still doing this? And I don't do this very much anymore, sort of stand up in front of audiences and teach and do this stuff. And it's because I think for the last 10 to 12 years, I have just had a further and further belief in the nature and the philosophy of what you do within this district. And I've loved to watch the evolution that's happened in this district, which truly has moved from sort of thinking about university as a trophy to be won, and more along the lines of a much healthier disposition, which is, where will my kid get in? Will she be happy there? And can we afford to send him there? And I think that's sort of a much healthier trifecta. And I want to sort of point out one other thing, and I want to do this at the beginning, because you always say the most important thing at the beginning. Walnut Valley Unified students are extraordinarily accomplished. I mean, you know this, you live this. It is now AP everything. Next year, there's going to be AP lunch. You will eat more calories in less time. This is totally normal. After that will be AP gymnastics, in which case you'll sort of slaughter yourself with 6,000 push-ups. It's AP everything. You're an incredibly accomplished, studious, driven, academic, interesting group of people. So I can look you all in the eye and say, every one of you is going to have a multiplicity of choices when it comes to college. It's not if. Really, the entire debate here is merely where. And there is a reason, and I was looking at the board, there is a reason that we have colleges waiting to meet you from Oregon and Arizona and California and Pennsylvania and Missouri and 2 or 3 other states that I hear are in America. Because they know exactly the quality of the student they are getting. They're not here to entertain themselves. They are here to recruit you. You're in a much more powerful position than you realize. Now, if your college list is Harvard, Yale, Stanford, and Berkeley is your safety school, this is not going to be pleasant. But most of you are not that insane, right? And so part of my plea today will be to show you some of the math and some of the data that is remarkably compelling, that the wider you cast your net, the more powerful your results are going to be. And my entire overarching philosophy, ladies and gentlemen, is to create options and choice. Options about where you're going to go to college. Options about how much you're going to pay for college. Options about what you want to spend in college. I want you to have alternatives around geography, around economics, around student behavior and student life. And is there a football team? And if you come out and 6 colleges have said yes to you, and there's 6 kind of different schools, that is a journey well done. Does that make sense? I promise you, every now and again I will pause and invite questions, because it's much more fun to interact this way because you're living humans, as opposed to a webinar where I'm screaming into the void. Okay? We begin. Oh, look, magic 8-ball. And me, when the hair was not quite as gray. That's my email address. Any of you are welcome to email me over the next week with any questions that you might have. By the way, I know there's this tendency to take pictures of screens. I promise you I'm going to put a QR code up, and I will email you this presentation and a bunch of other data at the end. So you can write my email down. I'm very happy to answer your questions. I'm going to begin with this. This is your friend, and this is called the Common Data Set. And the amount of information that is available to you in the Common Data Set is virtually limitless. Nothing is hidden. You want to know what percentage of kids were accepted? It's in here. You want to know what the most popular majors are at any school? It's in here. You want to know how many kids they took off the wait list last year? It's in here. Anything you want to know about a school, it's in here. It's mandatory reporting that takes place on an annual basis. It's my favorite place to go when I go on a data hunt. and it's available to you. And the easiest way to do it is you take the name of a school, I use Georgetown, and you type in Georgetown Common Data Set, and it'll just come up and you can download it. Now, you'll have a choice. The data set is either current or 1 year old. So right now, you can access the 22 or the 23. If you're a junior, in about 4 months, you'll be able to access the 24 data set. Everything is written down. Does that make sense? Any questions on that? I will continue. Guys, come in, have a seat. You're not going to bug me. I don't want you to have to stand in the back. Here are the tabs. Here's all the stuff that's available. Now, for example, look at this one, tab J, degrees conferred. Let's say you're really interested in computer science. Well, the problem with computer science is these days you have to have like a 9.0 and donate kidneys as your extracurricular activity. Because like the possibility of getting to comp sci has gotten ridiculously low. Like consistently I see 1 and 1.5% admit rates. What you want to do is you want to look at schools where at least 5% of the majors are comp sci. Because then it's a dominant major within a university. And then it is actually easier to get into because they are committed to that major. So for example, Purdue in Indiana, about 25% of the people who graduate with comp sci majors. Santa Clara is another school where a lot of people have comp sci majors. And I would argue, if you have a passion for a subject, you want to go to a school that shares your passion. You don't want to be the only philosophy major on campus. You'll be weird and the worst dressed. You want to have other people who are equally weird and can discuss Nietzsche with you in the original German, and you'll have 3 friends. If you want to do engineering, you don't want to be the only one of 10 or 50 or 100 in engineering. You want to be in a place that values and loves engineering the way you do it. And how do you find it? This thing, the Common Data Set. It is a goldmine of stuff. On tab F, student life, it'll tell you things like what percentage of the student body is in the Greek system. And that's actually one of those cut points. People either love or hate the Greek system. So if you hate the Greek system, don't go to a school where like 40% of the people are in sororities or fraternities. You won't like the culture. So tab F gives you a good insight into culture. So the purpose of today is to show you and give you tools that you can use to make better and more informed choices. We continue. These changes are driven by these factors. So the things I'm about to teach you, it is perfectly reasonable for you to say, why is this happening to me at this time? I am going to say some things tonight that you're not actually going to like. And I'm not doing it to irritate you. I am doing it so you can be informed as consumers and understand the why. And here's the why. So for example, more and more applications are going into colleges. I'll show you this in a second. But more people are not applying to college. In other words, you're applying to more schools. You're replicating like bad DNA. But the schools don't know this. They go from 40,000 to 50,000 to 60,000 applicants. All of those humans seem real to them. It puts a lot of pressure in the admissions department to sort of figure out, are you serious about coming here or not? It's made the job much, much harder. If you've ever heard the term demonstrated interest, it's come from schools who aren't sure that you're serious about them. So for example, UCLA doesn't care. They know if they take you, you're showing up. Yale doesn't care. They know if they take you like they have descended from Mount Olympus and dubbed thee worthy, you're showing up. BYU doesn't care because everyone BYU accepts shows up because they're all of the same faith. But you know who does care? TCU cares. Pepperdine cares. Loyola Marymount cares. Private schools that are mid-tier care so much about whether you're serious in going there. That's what demonstrated interest comes from. And it's because more and more and more numbers are showing up on their front door. And then the other thing towards the bottom, the mission of public universities is evolving, is a big deal that I will teach in a second. Before I continue, any questions over here? Anyone so far? Then I will continue. Look at this. For parents, you probably went to university 90 to 95. When you went to university, about 40 to 45% of the kids applying and getting into universities had 4.0 or higher. Look what it is now. It's 70. By the way, this year it's 74. 74% of the students as freshmen had high school GPAs of 4.0 or higher. What does that mean? It means it becomes very, very difficult to distinguish students based purely upon grades, right? What's happened with test scores? They've become optional, or in the case of the UC system, they don't exist at all. So everybody has really good grades. And test scores are iffy, right? Some schools maybe, some schools not at all, some schools want them. It means that the numbers, it's harder to distinguish. So what do you begin to look at? Strength of curriculum. Walnut Valley crushes strength of curriculum. AP test results. How did you actually do on your AP exams? Again, Walnut Valley crushes AP test results. And are you an interesting person? And that's the essays. That's your extracurriculars. In fact, increasingly, EQ is becoming as important as IQ. So, earlier on when you and I were talking about you sort of have to find this one thing and talk about it, that's you showing emotional intelligence. Your ability to tell a good story in an authentic way is increasingly powerful in a universe where the numbers look so similar. Does that sort of make sense? Okay, next. This is an iceberg. You know the story of the iceberg. You only see 10% above the waterline. That's the 10% we focus on as parents. Grades, test scores, essays, extracurriculars, the things we believe we control. But 90% of the decision making is made below the waterline, and that's called institutional priorities. So for example, Princeton decides they need 2 oboists because their oboists in their choir are graduating. So what do they go and hire that year? What do they bring into their campus? 2 or 3 oboists. And what happens in our community? We go, ooh, you want to go to Princeton? Play the oboe. 7,000 families then go into oboe classes. The problem, of course, is they took their oboists. They won't need an oboist next year. They'll need a clarinetist. Trying to guess what these people want is a fool's game. What you should always do instead is be fully, overwhelmingly, uniquely yourself. And if they want one of those this year, you're standing like a beacon saying, pick me, pick me, pick me. That's the power of great essay writing, is to show yourself in all of your glory and all of your passion to see if you fit institutional priorities. Institutional priorities are sometimes ethnic. They're sometimes geography. I was talking with a family earlier. Where in America do Asian American students not go? Regionally. We don't go to the South. Right? That's simply not part of America that exists for us conceptually. So if we are a talented Asian American student and you look to go to a school like Georgia or Alabama, I swear these are actually places in America, they are going to roll out the red carpet for you because you are an institutional priority. You're bright, you're hardworking. There aren't many folks like you on campus, and they want more, which means they're also going to give you a lot of money. This is part of the way you use data to play the game. And part of my job today is to have you engage in an expansionist mindset. I'm not saying go to the University of Alabama. I am simply saying, start to think about places that want you badly, because they're going to pay to get you, and they're going to say yes. And I like yes. Even if I choose not to go there, yes is good for students. I often have my students apply to Arizona State. You know why I have my students apply to Arizona State? They apply on Tuesday. They're admitted on Thursday. On Friday, they get the scholarship offer. Do you know how good that makes a human feel? Like, oh my God, someone actually wants me. And all I'm trying to do is get over this hurdle where people are going, how am I ever going to get into college? Oh, it's easy. Apply to Arizona State. If you are human with a pulse, and when you breathe against a mirror, it fogs, welcome to the land of the Sun Devil. There's nothing wrong with that. And that, of course, is sort of part of the game that I love to teach. Any questions on this? Again, I absolutely welcome any questions that you have, and certainly no question is going to surprise or offend me. I teach this more for parents than students. I have kindly assumed that most of you went to college in the 90s. And so what I did is I looked at the admit rates of colleges in the 90s. You and I talked about UC Irvine. So in 1994, the admit rate to get into Irvine was 60%. Or you look at USC. In 1995, the admit rate at USC was 70%. And if you were from Orange County, it was like 100. And you look at Chicago, 68. And even something like Harvard was 15. And that's when you as parents went to college. So you flash forward one generation, and you see these numbers, and it appears terrifying. So thus you begin to have this perception, it is impossible to get into college. I mean, my God, even like UC Irvine's making it hard to get in. But these are the exceptions. These are not the rules. Even before I knew you, Bob, I used to ask my students a question. This is back in the 80s when pterodactyls roamed the globe. I would go to my students at Princeton Review at the end of every year, and I would say, did you get into one of your top 3 choices for college? And in the 80s, about 92, 93% said, yeah, I did. I've kept doing that every single year since that. So this year, I surveyed all of my students, about 2,000 of them, and I said, did you get into one of your top 3 choices for college? And 91% said yes. So this is my second promise. Are you going to get into college? Yes. Are you going to get into a college that excites you, that you love? Yes. All of this stress is self-induced. If you enjoy it, knock yourself out. But you don't have to feel that way. The outcome is preordained. You are going to have fantastic outcomes coming out of a fantastic district, having a multiple set of choices about where you go to college. I promise you that. And that's the reason all those people out there are sweating in the gym and sweating in the library, because they can't wait to meet you. Now, this is only half the story. Here's the second half. Yield. Yield is defined as, if I accept you into my college, what are the odds that you're going to show up? So if 100 people are accepted and 40 of them show up in the fall, that's a 40% yield. Most colleges have a 20% yield. It means they can only grab about 1 in 5 students. It means 80% say no. Question, which college in North America has the highest yield? It's not Harvard. What do you guys think? Not Harvard. UCLA's 44-ish. It's BYU. Well done. But why is it BYU? Yes, because they have a perfect match between the students they accept and the culture that they have. BYU is the crown jewel within the Latter-day Saints faith. So when they are accepted into BYU, that's a community that they embrace. Yield drives everything in college. And here's the thing about yield, and this is why I have this graphic. It's like the sun. It rises in the east, it sets in the west, it never changes. That's what the sun always does. Yield is that way. Yield never, ever, ever changes. For the last 10 years, if it was 40%, next year it's going to be 40%. Decade from now, it's going to be 40%. Yield is sacrosanct until COVID. And COVID has done very, very weird things to yield. So for example, post-COVID, California kids don't want to leave California. Florida kids don't want to leave Florida. Texas kids don't want to leave Texas. I can't explain that one. New York kids don't want to leave New York, right? So yield numbers have changed. Here's why you care. Look at this. In 2021, Chicago's yield was 70%, and they took 2,460 students. The following year, it was 88%, so they took fewer kids. The more yield goes up, the more they reduce the incoming class. Yield is an incredibly powerful leading indicator for how many kids they're going to take the following year. If yield goes up, what does the university do? Takes fewer kids. If yield drops, what does the university do? They take more kids, and now it's all going to come together. Where do you find the yield numbers? Common data set. So there's an incredibly powerful leading indicator for you right now. So you're thinking, what are my chances? I'm thinking about applying to College X. You go to the common data set. You see what the yield has been the last 2 or 3 years. And you see, is it going up or is it going down? Going down, that's very good for you. Going up, uh-oh. So here's an example. Purdue had a spike in their yield this year. So they actually are putting kids in hotel rooms. They don't have room for them on campus. 600 more students showed up than they were supposed to. So what's Purdue going to do this year? They're going to take 800 fewer kids. What's going to happen to Purdue's admit rate? It's going to plummet. Now you know, yield drives everything. You look at yield, you can anticipate what's going to happen. That slide is why I came here tonight. No one knows this. No one thinks about this. This is a way you can become a more informed consumer. Track yield. So now I'm definitely going to stop. Who has questions? I'm on camera. Hello. You're either stunned or fascinated. I continue. So now we're going to get to some of the relevant concepts. You know this. You've lived it. You've seen it. Our kids aren't getting into UCLA and Berkeley and San Diego and Irvine as much as they used to. Our kids didn't get worse. What happened? So this is one of those things I'm going to teach that is true that you're not going to like. And what I'm going to speak to here is politics, not from a negative or judgmental perspective, but how politics are influencing admissions. So we have blue states, and we have red states. Blue states have a philosophy for their flagship universities. For us, that's the UCs. And that philosophy is that students who have no privilege have a limited choice about where to go to university. That our universities should act as engines of social uplift to take the have-nots and turn them into haves. And conversely, they believe, and possibly with justification, that kids of privilege will find other places to go. But the kids without privilege, the UCs are pretty much their only choice. So in blue states, here's what you see. Test optional or no test scores at all. And a shift in the matrix where they're taking more and more kids from less privileged areas and neighborhoods. That's what you see happening in California and Boston and New York. It's a change in admission philosophy. The opposite is happening in red states, where the red states are going, we don't believe that. We want the best and brightest kids we can get our hands on. So they love test scores, they love grades, and they love California kids. Because as California kids get increasingly shut out of the defined UC system, some of our best and brightest are now available to these other schools. And so this means that you should consider applying to flagship universities in red states. Not only will they accept you, they'll probably give you so much money that it costs less to go there than to stay here. That's an important thing to wrap your brain around. It's not a political construct. It's more of a philosophy of admissions. So the University of Georgia looks at test scores and gives money to people with high test scores. So does Tennessee. So does Florida. But Boston doesn't. And New York doesn't. And California doesn't. And Washington doesn't. And that's sort of the difference there. And it has become more and more prevalent in California in the post-COVID years. So again, not something you're necessarily going to like, but that is the why behind sort of wonderful, talented Walnut Valley Unified students with A's in everything who somehow didn't get into UC Davis other than the wait list. That's what's happening. Oh, you remember earlier I told you that yield has gone crazy? The result of yield going crazy is that colleges are now using wait lists because they're not sure how many kids are going to show up. So if you have a wait list, you wait until everybody shows up and you kind of go, hey, I got 50 spots left. And you start calling kids on the wait list. Hey, do you want to come to LA? Do you want to come to LA? And they get 50 kids who say yes, and they can fill up all the seats and have no risk. That's why so many UC students are going onto the wait list. Where can you find out the number of students who came off a wait list? Common data set. Got it? Questions? Go. Common data set. Or ChatGPT 4.0. Seriously, ChatGPT hit taught to text. What was the yield last year at Princeton? It gives it to you. It also gives you your entire AP US history essay, but that's a different story for a different day. Okay? Yes? Yield protection is very much a real thing. So yield protection. Yield protection is when a university wants to maintain its yield. They don't want to see their yield drop. Wait lists are a perfect way to do that. Now, you've asked a really smart question. I'm going to follow up with also a smart question. Why do colleges care about yield protection? Go. Prestige is the normal answer. It is not the correct one. Why do colleges care about yield protection? Who said money? Money is the correct answer. So you know how the colleges borrow a lot of money. Colleges borrow a lot of money because they have to bring in new buildings. One of the key drivers in college, you make college visits, how old is the gym? How old are the dormitories? What are the physical facilities like? That's becoming more and more prevalent because 55% of college students are now women. Only 45% identify as men. So it's very much driven by facilities. So colleges borrow a lot of money. The higher your yield, the lower the interest rate you pay on your bonds because you're more of a sure thing. Like everyone knows Harvard's going to stay in business. They're not so sure that Redlands will. That was terrible to Redlands. I just say very different yields, right? So they care about yield because yield absolutely protects the amount they pay on their bonds. All right, other questions? Red state schools I've talked a lot about this last year. Oh my goodness, Utah threw so much money at my students. It's Utah. It's close, it's an hour, good skiing. But Utah threw a lot of money at people. This means you should expand your lists. You should create more options. And the last point, one of the most fundamental decisions you must reach as a student on your journey is where you are going to apply early. And once again, data is your friend. So Northeastern is a very, very popular school in Boston. They have a 7% admit rate. So that's really low, right? Do you know what their admit rate is for early decision? 60. What does that tell you? You want to go to Northeastern, what do you have to do? You have to apply early. Tulane is the same. 5% regular, 55% early. You want to look at the ratios. of early decision versus regular decision. Gosh, I wonder where you could possibly find that. Exactly right. So schools' early decision and early action, this is one of the fundamental decisions that you have to make, and you have to make it about now. And you should not apply early decision to a school unless you absolutely know you want to go there and you know you can afford to go there. Because early decision is a binding contract, so they got you. So you got to know that you want to go, and you got to know that you can pay the bank. Early action is not binding. But applying early to private schools also does one other thing. It shows enormous demonstrated interest. I want to come to your school so badly, I have applied early to it. Does that make sense? And this is, for you who are seniors, this is one of the most important decisions that you have to reach. And if you want to know what the early decision percentage is and you're not willing to go to the common data set, ChatGPT 4.0. 3.0 isn't as good. 4.0 gives you much better data. Other questions? Yeah. The gentleman's point, but Paul, isn't it kind of skewed? Aren't the people who are applying early decision so much more accomplished than the kids who are applying regular decision? Surprisingly, not anymore. You know why? What percentage of students going to college already have GPOs over 4.0? It's 75%, right? And in a test-optional universe and an AP-rich curriculum, you'd be surprised at the number of students going into that pool. It's sort of blurring. They're all pretty damned accomplished. The thing that does skew early decision, particularly at the Ivies, that's where they bring in all their athletes. So Ivies show much higher admit rates in early decision, but it's not for the rank and file. It's not for us. It's for the athletes, or it's for the people who give a lot of money. That's where the early pool goes. That answer your question? This. You are an academically privileged group. That's not an economic construct. It's just known at Walnut and Diamond Bar, these are the two most powerful public high schools in California. They are stunningly accomplished schools. They're in the same breath as the schools in Palo Alto. They're probably top 15 in the state. You are academically privileged. Therefore, it is expected at most private schools that you will take and submit test scores because you come from privilege. Now, they don't say that out loud. But if you come from privilege, they want test scores. If you're not sure whether the school you are applying to wants you to take a test, email me and go, hey, I want to go to this place. Will they want me to take a test? And I will answer that for you. Also, if you have a learning difference, you have ADHD or dysgraphia, or you have a 504 plan, you're not expected to take standardized tests because that would be cruel and unusual punishment. But in general, if you come from academic privilege, the expectation is that you will submit a standardized test score. And that's probably not something you like to hear, but it is true. It's not true for all schools, which is why I encourage you to email me if you're not sure. What is absolutely true is that AP scores from your sophomore and junior year are now very much part of the admissions decision, and you should control which scores schools see. You should make decisions. Do I want them to see that I got a 3? Do I want them to see that I got a 4? You should be very, very mindful about which scores you choose to share. If you're not sure, email and ask me. I'm happy to answer it for you. If you go, I'm applying to this school, I want to be a chem major, here are my APs, which ones should I tell them? I'm perfectly happy to give you that advice, okay? Number 2, blue state schools don't care as much about standardized test scores as red state schools. Private schools care a lot about standardized test scores if you're coming from a privileged background. Number 3, you already know this. Almost all of the Ivy Leagues have reinstated test scores. Johns Hopkins has brought them back. MIT has brought them back. I expect that trend to continue. Having said that, only 36 colleges in America currently require test scores. Only 36. My guess is next year it'll be around 50. Got it? And finally, that's your matrix. Do I test? Do I do SAT or ACT? Hint. If you love English and you don't like math as much, take the ACT. See, the SAT, half of it's English and half of it's math. So people who are good at math, it reflects well in the SAT. On the ACT, 2/3 of it's non-math and 1/3 of it's math. And if you have no idea what I just said, take the ACT. ACT, not so much for you guys as seniors, but for the juniors in the room, ACT is changing. It's going online and they're eliminating the science section. So the ACT will be shorter and only have 3 sections rather than the current 4. But that's another part of the matrix. You got to decide when you take the tests, and you got to compare it to your college lists and sort of see which schools actually care about tests. So really, these are the decisions, right? Am I going to go early or not? How am I going to balance my list? And what am I going to do with test scores? Now, that was a lot. Questions? What do you got? Yes, sir. Back. IB is International Baccalaureate. I'm going to show my ignorance. Do we have IB here? So IB is the gold standard of all academics. So when you have an IB exam, they look at the scores on the 1 through 7 scale. But even more importantly, selected schools look to see, are you full diploma or certificate? So when a school has an IB program, that elevates it to sort of the creme de la creme, and IB is the top of the standards for any academic program in North America. So in many ways, an IB score is more important than an AP score. Does that answer your question? What's the no part? Keep going. So this is actually a very fair point, right? There's 3 factors here, AP versus IB. One, how good am I academically? Like, how hard can I push? Well, if you're seeking only academics and admissibility, you got to go IB, and you got to go full diploma. If you're saying, I don't want to pay as much for college, or I want to accelerate my curriculum in college, well, then AP is better, because AP gives you college credit and gets you out of taking certain classes. And then if you want to have balance in your life so that you can sort of be strong academically but also be in the school play and continue to play soccer, and you can't do all of those 3 things and full IB, then I do a mix of IB and AP. So it very much depends upon the student. But if you were saying purely, I only care about going to college and I only care about improving my odds of admissions, you go full IB. You had a question here. Yep. Not at all. They'll either ignore it if they don't want it, or they'll sort of say, oh, that's nice, in the same way that swimming is nice. And that's actually the real way to look at it, that the ability to do well on tests is almost like an extracurricular to them. It has validity, but it's just sort of not what it was in your father's era when it was the be-all and end-all, right? But blue states don't use test scores as much as red states. Yes, in the back. If I apply early action, does that impair my ability to get scholarships, right? Sorry, thank you. If you apply early action, you are not committing to that school, and you have all the flexibility you wish to compare financial aid awards, and applying early action usually doesn't even impair scholarships. In fact, if you apply early action, you know they want you. They know you don't have to commit. They'll come in hard with a scholarship offer because they want you badly enough they're going to pay for you. Early decision is different. They've got you. That's a commitment. You're married. Right? You're in. So here we go. I want to be a bio major. I took AP Bio. I got a 3. Do I show it? You don't want to, you kind of have to. Because there's an expectation that if you took bio and you want to be a bio major, we kind of want to know how you did. English? You want to be an English major? They would expect to see the English AP. So there's kind of a connection. There's a belief that, well, heck, if you want to study it, you must be good at it, so I expect you to show that connectivity. So that's kind of a rational piece. Again, it depends upon the college. There are places where if you have a 3 or a 4 on the AP, you're fine. Oh, no. Thank you. Thank you. Your AP Bio, you got a 5 in AP Bio, you got a 3 in AP English. You don't need to see the AP, show the AP English. You have complete control over that. Thank you for the explanation. All right. This is one of the themes I've talked about early. Look at these schools and see how much of their class they filled from the early applicant pool. Like you can see it. Half the slots at Dartmouth are gone before they ever get to regular decision. 56% of them are gone at Northwestern. Now, where could I possibly find this data? Common data set, or my other favorite, ChatGPT, but 4.0. They're not hiding it. We're just not thinking about looking for it. So, I mean, knowing what percentage of a class is filled from the early applicant pool, I would want to know that before I made my decision. Because if I'm chasing very, very few slots, I probably shouldn't expect to get in. And this was the theme for today. What could I teach you that you didn't already know as a fairly learned audience that you could use to make more informed decisions, even if the things I was teaching you were somewhat annoying? So if I've managed to inform and annoy you, I have done my job. So on the orange side, these are the things that are obvious. And on the green side, these are the things I want to discuss. This community is particularly guilty of being prisoners of rumor. The most deadly words I ever hear in college admissions for all of us at this school is any sentence that begins with, I heard. Because whatever follows I heard is pant-wettingly terrifying and always wrong. I heard you can't get into Stanford from Walnut unless you're left-handed and 6'6". Like, weird stuff. I heard that Stanford really, really wants clarinetists this year. I mean, it's always crazy stuff. Don't be prisoners of rumor. Do your own research. All the work is available for you. They don't hide any of it. Secondly, or you're going to hate this one, Mom and Dad, students, never, ever, ever show your college essays to your parents. Ever. It's a terrible idea. They can't edit you. They love you. There's no clear-eyed vision when your child gives you their writing. And also, if you know your parents are going to read it, you're going to write differently. Or even worse, Dad gets hold of the red pen and starts editing. And the kid had written, my funnest year at Diamond Bar was my junior year. And Dad melts down and goes, funnest is not a word. And all of a sudden, that sentence becomes the apotheosis of my high school experience, was my penultimate annum. There is no creature on God's earth who writes in as constipated a style as a 44-year-old man. You, as his 16-year-old daughter, that's not how you speak. It is not how you think. It is not how you present. And those of us in admissions can smell the stench of Dad's writings in less than 5 words. Don't have your parents edit your essays. Give your essays to someone who doesn't love you. and you give it to them, and you sort of say, is this me? Or is this me desperately trying to sound like somebody I am not? That's what you want to do. You'll get better and more honest feedback. That can also go in the category of really smart thing to learn that you as a dad is supposed to hate. The other thing I really like, pick interesting over perfect. I'm not seeking perfect students in admissions. You're 17. What could you possibly have done? What, reinvent the proton? No, just tell interesting stories. The best essays are about the small stories. Like when Dr. Taylor was up here, there were two things I really loved about his introduction. We've known each other and been friends for 24 years, and I was able to give him something that helped his kid go to Boise State. Those are two great small stories. The small stories are the best. For those of you who are parents, the best college essays are like Seinfeld episodes. They don't have a plot. They're about nothing at all. They're about lunch. But they're interesting. And as I begin to wrap this up, that's the QR code if you want this thing. All right, I'm going to share this story. I may have shared it last year, but I'm going to share this story. And then we're going to free you. I'm going to give it to you, and you're going to free him, right? So I'm the guy who started the Princeton Review. And then I was the CEO of America's largest private college company. I've known about admissions for 40 years. And my daughter, 3 or 4 years ago, who doesn't want to talk about college with me at all, comes up to me and she goes, Dad, I have a question about the ACT and college. And guys, you can see me swelling. Ta-da! It is my moment to shine. I'm like Christ the Redeemer above Rio. And before I can say a word, she looks at me, rolls her eyes, and goes, why am I even asking you? What do you know? And walks away. I'm gibbering in my dinosaur brain. I know everything. But see, the thing, my job as a parent is to be her cheerleader. My job as a parent is to remind her how wonderful she is and she's going to get to go to a good place, because it's true. And my job as a parent is to celebrate every single damn place that says yes to her, even if it's in a city that I don't know how to pronounce. That's my job. I am the head cheerleader. And that's the job I hope each of you have. And then when you go out there to talk to those colleges, students, you do the talking, because you're the ones going. I hope this hour was useful. It's been an absolute delight. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paul. I hope that you found something valuable with all of the great facts that Paul was able to share with us. I think I'm going to go download ChatGPT 4.0, Paul. But we have several options for you to look at in the gym. So you're going to head out our theater doors. You can go to the left or the right and then head down the stairs and you will dead end into our gym. Thank you again. Oh, sorry. Also the library, which is out our doors to the right. Thank you.
Always.